Hey guys, today I'll be updating my prediction for the 2022 gubernatorial elections, which are just a little bit over 7 months away this November. So in 2018, Democrats, of course, had a very good showing. They were able to win 23 governorships and flip 7 previously Republican-held governorships. And so this, of course, was obviously a good showing for the Democratic Party. They were able to win a majority of the popular vote with the 36 races that we had. In 2022, we will also see 32 races, but the fact that you do have to consider is that in 2018, they flipped back 7 seats, but 4 years prior, in 2014, the Democrats only won 18 governorships, to the Republicans with 31. So this was 2 years after the re-election of Barack Obama. In 2010, they did a little bit better with 20 governorships, and you go back 4 more years to 2006, and this was the last time the Democratic Party actually controlled more governorships than the Republicans, when they held 28. So obviously the Democratic Party did very well in 2018, but that was because of their disaster of a performance 4 years prior. So in 2022, the current governorships is 22 to 28, with the Democrats losing the state of Virginia to Glenn Youngkin just last November. So in 2022, if the Democrats want to win a majority, they will have to flip at least 4 governorships, and if they just want to win half, they will of course only have to flip 3. So I'm going to start off by filling in the solid governorships on this map, with the states of California, Colorado, and Hawaii right off the bat going to be very solid for the Democratic Party. Gavin Newsom in California, Jared Polis in Colorado, both going to win their re-elections, especially in California after Gavin Newsom survived his recall by a very strong margin. For the Republicans, they are of course going to win all of these seats in the upper northwestern region, with Kristi Noem, who only won by 3% in 2018. I think she's obviously going to win by over 15%. She's become a big name among the Republican Party and is one of the most popular governors in the country at this point in time. With the Republicans, they will also be winning most of the races in the South with very solid margins, as well as the 2 races in Vermont and New Hampshire. So the governors in these 2 states are elected every 2 years. In 2020, we saw Phil Scott re-elected by 41%, Chris Sununu by 32%. So both of these governors will be running for re-election in 2022, and I fully expect them to win by very solid margins. Now, for the Democratic Party, we have some other states here on the East Coast. So starting off with the state of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker is going to win his re-election, as well as Kathy Hochul in New York after taking over for Andrew Cuomo. So Kathy Hochul, although there was that one poll that showed that she was down 2% against Lee Zeldin, that was an internal poll, and it's obviously not going to happen. Kathy Hochul is going to easily win her first election to win a full 4-year term as governor of New York. In the state of Massachusetts and Maryland, these 2 states I also have as being solid for the Democratic Party. Now, the problem here for the Republicans, even though they do currently hold both of these governorships, in Massachusetts, they have Charlie Baker. In Maryland, they have Larry Hogan. Now, the problem is that these 2 governors are term limited, so after 2018, they were not able to run again, and so although they are very popular in their very Democratic states, it is going to be very difficult for the Republicans to find a replacement, a Republican that is going to be able to garner votes from most independents as well as a huge chunk of Democrats, because that's really what you need to do to win in these 2 very Democratic eastern states. Now, this is obviously good news for the Democratic Party. They're not going to have too much trouble winning both of these governorships, and I think that, obviously they're going to win them by very solid margins. Joe Biden won both of these states by around 33% just, a little bit over a year ago. So this will give the Democrats 13 governorships and the Republicans with 18. Now, before I categorize the likely governorships, make sure you join my Discord server if you have not, the link to which is at the very top of the description below, where you can stay updated on the 2022 governor and Senate elections. Now, taking a look at the likely governorships we have on this map, I'm going to start off with the state of Oregon. So by likely, I mean states in which the the winning party is going to win by between 5 to 15%, and of course solid is anything over 15%. In the state of Oregon in 2018, we saw the re-election of Kate Brown. She will be term limited in 2022, and Kate Brown was not exactly the strongest candidate for the Democratic Party. I do think that whoever succeeds her will not do too much worse because she only won by 6%. In 2022, I don't think this will be too competitive of a race. Oregon, of course, is by far a more Democratic state than it is Republican. It has voted Democratic on the presidential level for decades now, and I don't think anything is going to change there. So the state of Oregon going to be likely for the Democratic Party. In the state of New Mexico, we have the re-election of Michelle Lujan Grisham. She is not going to face too much pushback either. She won by over 15% in 2018, and I think that in 2022, as the presumptive nominee now, she is probably going to win by a little bit of a smaller margin, just because of the fact that 2022 is still expected to be a red wave year that will favor the Republican Party. Moving a little bit further to the east, we have the state of Iowa. Now, the state of Iowa, I will be giving to the Republican Party. I do think that Kim Reynolds is probably going to win her re-election. She, of course, was not exactly the strongest candidate in 2018. She only won by around 3%. If you look at 2014, Terry Branstad was able to win almost 60% of the vote, and Kim Reynolds was his running mate. So in 2018, Kim Reynolds only won by less than 3%, but in 2022, she is probably going to win by a larger margin as the incumbent governor. I would not be surprised if she was to do a lot better this time around. In the state of Texas, I'm also going to give this race to the Republicans as well, with Greg Abbott, who will be running for re-election. In 2018, he was able to win by 13%, a very strong margin even for a Republican at this point in time. Of course, in 2020, Trump won the state of Texas by just 5%. Now, in 2022, I don't think Greg Abbott is going to do any better. He will be running against Beto O'Rourke, who is clearly the best Democratic candidate that they could have put up, although, the state of Texas is still a state that heavily favors the Republican Party. For Beto O'Rourke, I think that it will be a very tough race for him. He has already won the Democratic nomination. Abbott has already won the Republican nomination, but this race, I think, is going to be heavily contested, heavily watched no matter what. But, Beto O'Rourke is currently obviously not polling too well, as Greg Abbott has led in basically every single poll that has been released between the two, anytime recently. So this will give the Republicans now 20 governorships. I will also be giving them the state of Ohio with Mike Dewine. I think this is another one of the more interesting races that we have this year. So in 2018, Mike Dewine was able to win just 50.4% of the vote. He is, of course, not a very Trump-supporting Republican. He is a lot more on the moderate side, and that is why he has garnered a lot of attacks from the Trump wing of the party, and why he is currently facing a very contested primary race against Jim Renacci. Jim Renacci, who of course lost the Senate race to I believe it was Bob Casey in 2018. So Jim Renacci is not exactly the best candidate on a statewide level in the state of Ohio, or not Bob Casey, but to Sherrod Brown in 2018. So my bad for that. In 2018, as you can see here, Sherrod Brown defeated Jim Renacci with 53% of the vote. So this was a race the Republicans were targeting heavily, as of course Trump won the state by over 8% in 2016, but Sherrod Brown still ended up defeating Renacci by a pretty strong margin. Now, the good news for Mike Dewine is that he is leading in his primary race. At one point, Renacci did seem like he might actually win the nomination with the support of Trump, and his wing of the party. However, at this point, Mike Dewine seems to have retaken the lead, and he is now the frontrunner for his own race. And on the Democratic side, John Cranley, the former mayor of Cincinnati, currently seems to be the frontrunner there. And so I think no matter what happens, it's going to be a win for the Republican Party. Mike Dewine is probably going to win his re-election, and I don't think this race is going to be too heavily watched after the primary, where Jim Renacci is most likely going to lose. In terms of likely states, I also have the state of Minnesota. This is another race that I don't think will be too contested. We have Tim Walz running for his re-election. In 2018, he won by over 11%, and in all the polling that we've seen recently from the state as well, basically all the polling we've seen from the state of Minnesota, Tim Walz leads by some pretty strong margins and has led in every single poll that has been released over the last couple of months. So this will be another likely seat for the Democrats. I will also be giving them both the states of Connecticut and Rhode Island, with Ned Lamont winning his re-election in the state of Connecticut, and in the state of Rhode Island, I don't think it will be too contested either. Gina Raimondo is not running for re-election anymore. She is currently Biden's Secretary of Commerce. So in 2022, Dan McKee, her lieutenant governor, is going to be running for his first full term, and I think that no matter what happens, he's probably going to do worse than Raimondo, but he is still probably going to win the race in the end. So this is going to give the Democrats now 18 seats. And the Republicans, I have 2 more, starting off with the state of South Carolina with Henry McMaster. McMaster is, was first elected in 2018. He, of course, was governor before because he took over after Nikki Haley, the governor elected in 2014, became the ambassador to the UN for Donald Trump. So in 2018, McMaster won his first full term, and in 2022, he is going to be running for re-election, and I think that he is probably going to win this race as well. I don't think it will be too contested. And in the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis in 2022 is obviously going to win his re-election as well. He's one of the most popular governors in the country. I think it would be very surprising if he did lose, but in 2018, he did only very narrowly defeat Andrew Gillum. I don't think this will happen again, as Ron DeSantis will be running against Nikki Fried or Charlie Crist for the Democratic primary. I think that both of them are going to lose pretty astoundingly. Charlie Crist is a current U.S. representative, but also the former governor of the state of Florida. And Nikki Fried is, of course, the only statewide elected Democrat in the entire state of Florida. However, currently Charlie Crist does lead this primary, and I do think he will end up winning it. However, the polling does show that they both really do not stand too much of a chance against Ron DeSantis. So this is going to give the Republicans 23 and the Democrats 18 with their likely seats filled in. So now I'm going to move on to taking a look at the lean races on this map, starting off with the state of Nevada and the re-election of Steve Sisolak. I do think that Steve Sisolak is going to end up on top, defeating Adam Laxalt in 2018, and I think that in 2022 he is not going to do too much worse. If you do look at the latest polling for his race, you will see that he has led in most of the recent polls that have been released. Currently, Lombardo is the front runner, but I don't think Steve Sisolak is going to lose this race. I think that he will outperform Catherine Cortez Masto, whether or not she wins her Senate race. So this will give the Democrats 19. I also have the state of Michigan going for Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen Whitmer has been in a lot of controversy over the last couple of years, especially with her handling of COVID-19. But I do think that she will end up on top. She won by almost 10% in 2018 and currently in 2022. Polling, of course, does show that she is probably going to defeat James Craig once again, or not once again, but she is probably going to defeat whoever the Republican candidate is once again. I don't think Gretchen Whitmer is in too much trouble, but this will obviously be a very contested and very heavily watched race. And the final lean race I have on this map for the Democrats is the re-election of Janet Mills in the state of Maine. And of course, by lean, I mean margins of between 1 and 15%. So in the state of Maine, Janet Mills in 2018 won her first election by a little bit over 7%. In 2014, this was a governorship held, of course, by the Republican Party. So this was one of the flips that we saw in 2018. But Janet Mills in 2022, I don't think she's going to win by over 7%. She will be running against Paul LePage, who is the former governor that, of course, was reelected in 2014. And so I do think that Paul LePage is going to end up short in this race. I think that he will definitely make this race a lot more competitive, but former governors, if they're running right after they just left office, they typically do lose to the incumbent of a different party, especially if that incumbent won by over 7% previously. So I do think that in the state of Maine, it will still be a race that the Democrats will hold on to, but I think that LePage will obviously make it a lot more competitive and a lot more interesting. And so on this map, I have 2 lean seats now for the Republicans, with the first one being the state of Alaska and Mike Dunleavy, who is attempting to run for re-election. I think that Mike Dunleavy is most likely going to win. He will be running against Bill Walker, who was elected in 2014. Bill Walker did not really run for his re-election in 2018, so Mike Dunleavy was able to win. However, in 2022, Bill Walker will be running again. And if you look at the candidates, you'd of course have a lot of candidates, as we typically see in Alaska, but the main ones are the incumbent governor Mike Dunleavy and the former governor Bill Walker. Now, the issue here is that the only poll release does show Bill Walker leading over Dunleavy, but I do think the Republicans will still end up holding on to this race. But you will also see that no Republican has been able to win re-election to the Alaska governorship since 1978. So winning your re-election in the state typically seems to have been pretty hard, especially for the Republican Party. So we will see how Mike Dunleavy does, but currently I do expect an okay victory for him. In the state of Georgia, I also have this race as being lean for the Republicans. I do not think Stacey Abrams is going to defeat Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp is facing a primary challenge from David Perdue, but in the end, I do think that Brian Kemp is going to end up on top. He does lead in the polling that we've seen recently, and in polling against Stacey Abrams, he is polling better than he was in 2018. So I don't think that the Democratic Party is going to flip Georgia on the gubernatorial election this year, even though Stacey Abrams has helped, Jon Ossoff, Raphael Warnock both get elected to the Senate in 2020. I do think that it will be very difficult for her to win her own race this November. And finally, the final lean state I have on this map is the state of Kansas. This one is currently held by a Democrat in Laura Kelly. So Laura Kelly, I do believe, will lose her re-election. In 2018, she defeated Chris Kobach, who was a notoriously unpopular candidate, but in 2022, with a new Republican primary in Derek Schmidt as the Republican frontrunner, I do think that Laura Kelly is probably going to lose. She may lead in the polls right now, but the state of Kansas is a state that has not voted for the Democratic Party on the presidential level since the 1930s and FDR. And so, just looking at anything, you should not expect Laura Kelly to do very well in this race. She is running in a very, very difficult race in the state of Kansas, a very traditionally Republican state that has voted Republican for, almost the last century. So I do think that Laura Kelly, even though she was able to win in 2018, I do think that was a fluke, and she will probably lose in this November. In the final 3 races, I have Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Starting off with the state of Arizona, now that Doug Ducey is no longer able to run for re-election, he is term limited in 2022 with Kari Lake as the Republican frontrunner. I do think that they're going to lose. On the Democratic side, you have Katie Hobbs. I do think Katie Hobbs is a much better candidate than Kari Lake, and considering the fact that this state is shifting more and more to the left, and the fact that, Kari Lake is just a terrible candidate, you will probably see Katie Hobbs end up on top in Arizona. In the state of Wisconsin, Tony Evers is running for his re-election. I do think he is going to win, although Mandela Barnes will no longer be his running mate. Scott Walker was running for a 3rd term in 2018, and clearly people did not want him again, and Tony Evers was able to win. Scott Walker running for a 3rd term is not exactly the most popular thing you can do. In 2022, Tony Evers is running for his re-election, and on the Republican side, Rebecca Kleefisch is the current frontrunner, but I do think that in the end, Tony Evers is going to end up on top. This is going to be a very competitive race, but I do think that incumbents, they do typically win their re-elections, and Tony Evers is not too unpopular, so I do think that he will still end up doing quite well. And finally, in the state of Pennsylvania, I will be giving this race to the Democratic Party as well. In 2018, Tom Wolf won by over 17%, with John Fetterman as his running mate, but in 2022, I think things will be a lot different. I think the Democrats will do a lot worse. Fetterman nor Wolf will be running, so because Tom Wolf is term limited, and Tom Fetterman is John Fetterman is running for the Senate. So in the Democratic side, we have Attorney General Josh Shapiro as the Democratic frontrunner, and the Republicans, we have Brian Sims and Austin Davis. So, or not the Republicans, this is the lieutenant governor race, but on the Republican side, we have Lou Barletta, who lost in 2018 to Bob Casey by a very, very bad margin. So Lou Barletta as the Republican frontrunner, I don't think he's the best candidate for the GOP in this race. And so that is why I'm going to give the Democrat state of Pennsylvania, giving them 24 governorships, the Republicans with 26. This is my updated 2022 gubernatorial election prediction. Make sure to join my Discord server, link at the very top of the description below. And thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.